So here we are, a selection of props. And I'm going to take the first um, few moments of this evening's class to just settle down. I'm going to move my bricks sort of midway down the mat. I'm going to have my strap on top of that as well. It's all going to be within hand's range when I need it. And then I'm just going to let myself sit. So I find sitting heels into the groin on a block, tilting the pelvis forwards a bit. That's like my default setting, I guess. It just feels natural. But if you want to sit across and straddle a bolster or sit on top of a bolster and get more of a tilt of the pelvis, if it feels good, it's right. What we are trying to do is get to a point where the spine is nicely elongated and we can just have the hands resting palms down at this time of the evening on the thighs. So it just allows us to settle, ground down a little bit. Notice I say ground, not grind. It's definitely a feeling of coming back to home is what we're looking for. If it helps to let the mind settle, you can close the eyes or just find an object to focus on. And we're going to start to breathe, particularly through the belly. It's a really conscious connection to breathe in and let that belly expand. And on the exhale, let it draw back. And what we're looking for is a smoothness of that transaction taking place between the inhale and the exhale. So the belly wants to expand gently and then come back in, pretty much the same pace. So the duration of the inhale and the exhale are similar in length. You don't need to count, just let it be more of a feeling experience. And the more kind of adrenaline we've still got running through the body, the more tricky it is to get that belly to expand smoothly and bring it back in. So consciously considering the expansion and retraction actually reduces all of those levels of hormones in the brain that deal with us being alert, being ready for action. This allows us to become a little bit more focused on the immediate moment. And then we can tune in, hopefully, in our practice and look for refinement in the poses rather than gross. Now we're going to start to let ourselves move gently from here. I'm going to lie down onto the floor. I'm going to use the block behind the back of the head. I'm going to let the legs go out wide to the side, so you need a little bit of room to spread yourself about. Roll gently down and just bringing the feet in towards the bottom. Don't have to be super close. Taking the bricks just to the outside and a little bit lower of my hip bone. So that's where my hip bone is. So blocked sort of 3/4 of the way down. Allow the feet to be about hip distance apart. Unravel the strap. I take it around the sole of my right foot and lengthen the leg up. Allow myself to lift my body up a little bit. So I'm going to wrap the hand around the strap and then bind it in. And then as I sit back, got a nice straight leg, nice straight arm. We're kind of working together with each other. I'm going to float the left arm out to the side and I'm going to slowly let that right leg drift out to the side. So we do mean slowly. We take a moment to see how the groin feels. You use the arm to help stabilize. And the idea is to be able to bring the leg out and just rest it on top of the brick. So you might need to, I've got it on the lowest setting. You might need to take it slightly higher. You can move the brick closer in towards the hip joint or further away, depending on how far out your leg is happy to naturally extend out to the side. So I've got a little bit of support underneath the leg. I've got a little bit more support in the leg with the arm, and the groins are opening. I'm trying to allow both sides of the hips to sink down to the floor. So if you've rolled off to the side a little bit and you're feeling your left cheekbone lift away from the ground, I'm going to try and settle that down. So rather than worrying about where the leg extends out to the side, think about trying to drop that left cheek down to the floor. Now the reason I've got two blocks is, in my instance, I'm allowing myself to have one block on each side, but you could very easily have two blocks on one side and have even more of a prop height position. We're all different. Some of us got more open hips than others, and some of us have got tighter muscles in that area than others. So it can look and feel and be a different experience. We've got about another 30 seconds or so. And I'm going to use the arm to start to draw that rather heavy leg back. I have to use the leg a little bit as well. And then bring that foot down gently. Find a safe space for that to be. And then take the second leg, take the strap, I give a little lift in the body. Strap comes around the fist. I've got a good old connection there. Pretty straight leg and arm. Let myself roll back down onto the floor. Take that right arm out for a little bit of stability, and then slowly take that leg over. And with a bit of luck, I've got it right and don't end up with my foot resting against the radiator, getting burns. It's getting very close. Wow. Got that within about a centimetre of its life. So again, we're trying to let this right front hip bone, rest down to the floor, and therefore get a little bit more buttock and ground attraction happening. You control how much weight I'll let sit into that block. And we've got about 30 seconds more. Try and keep it nice and relaxed. And then I use that arm again to start the lift. To ease the leg back up. And then bring that in, let that soften. And I'm going to roll onto my right side. Just use the hands to press the lift up. I'm going to move the strap off to the side. I don't need that any longer. I'm going to come into child's pose. So going to have the knees about hip distance apart. Remember, if the knees a little bit need a bit of help, we have the block underneath the back of the legs to give it a bit of help. And if you're unable to get the forehead all the way down to the ground, then bring a block underneath the front of the head so it's lifted a little higher. And assuming that you can make contact with something, then you can take the hands towards the toes and let the shoulders relax. Now this does create a little bit more stress for the diaphragm to breathe into. You want to breathe into that area, which is nice and low down in the belly, because the corresponding movement is the spine stretching out gently. So if we can have a nice smooth breath, then we can get a very gentle stretch. And then we're going to slowly bring the hands forwards and lift ourselves back up. I'm going to use the 2 bricks again. I'm going to take myself into a supported bridge pose. So I know that for my body, a block and 2 bricks piled on top of each other thus is just the right height for my spine. But we're all different, and bigger is not better. That's for certain. I move towards more towards the front of the mat, and I'm going to have the feet deliberately wide. They're wider than the hips. We'll roll down gently. Now the head comes to the floor. Draw the belly in a little bit and start to peel the spine away from the ground. Now I'm able to lift up in one go generally, and then gently slide all of this back under the hips in one go. Sometimes you have to do that sort of one drop at a time. And if you're doing that, then you want to make sure with your fingertips that all of those blocks are sitting happily on top of each other, nicely aligned, so it's supporting you generously. The blocks go across the mat so that the two halves or the two sides of your pelvis are supported. And notice it's the top end of the pelvis rather than the bottom end. So it's the sort of bony bit that sits close to your waistband. We make sure that we don't have the spine pressing into these blocks at all. We want to make sure that we're supporting the pelvis in its weight. And then that might be where you want to stay, or you might feel happy to lift the hands up towards the sky and then float them gently back to the floor. Now you could take the arms out to the side and make them into sort of more of a cactus kind of shape if the elbows and the forearms don't sit naturally and happily against the ground. I want to avoid the arms floating in midair unsupported. They're going to be resting so that the shoulders can actually feel like they get a chance to relax and open. And try and release the muscles across the front of the belly and get a sense of gravity, bringing this gently back down towards the ground, although we're not actually going to move anywhere. Now I've used bricks and blocks. You could have used a nice firm bolster or even a rolled up blanket, as long as it gave you a good sense of support. I've taken the feet out now as wide as the mat, just so that the legs roll in a little bit. And one thing that I'm always conscious of in bridge pose, even when it's supported bridge pose, is keeping the head and the eyes facing towards the ceiling rather than looking around. And we're going to start to lift ourselves back out. So draw the hands slowly down by the side of the body. Walk the feet in a little bit more. Draw the belly muscles down and towards the spine so you can feel a little bit of contraction. You're going to lift the hips just a fraction, take one block out. Start to come down, take the second block out. Come down a little further, take the last block out. Continue to let the spine come all the way gently down to the floor. And stay there for a moment. See how the spine feels. And those curves have kind of straightened out a little bit. I'm going to draw the knees in towards the body, and then I'll draw the chin in towards the chest. I'll see if I can wrap my hands and arms underneath the back of the thighs. So rather than drawing the knees in and putting pressure onto them, I'm just bringing myself into that nice little ball. Seeing how that feels. I'm rocking a little bit from side to side, just very gently. When you get too enthusiastic, you fall over. Okay, I'll let myself roll complete now onto the right side. Use the hands to lift up on an exhale. And I'm going to come into butterfly pose. So I'm going to take that flat block again and just park that behind, lift up. I'm going to bring the soles of my feet together as close into my body as it feels comfortable to do. Took a little lift there and shifted onto the front edge of the sitting bones. And then I'm going to bring the hands in front. Now you can hold on to ankles, shins, or toes, whatever feels good. I'm going to let the chin drop. And I'm going to let the spine round down. And let that come forwards a little bit. I'm not making a specific effort to take the hands out in front, but you could do if that felt good. I think you might lean in the crown of the head, relax. I want to allow the back of the neck to find its own natural place, lengthening out. And I'm just going to sit here gently and breathe. I'm trying to put very little weight into the legs, pressing them down to the floor. I'm kind of letting those hang. So my forearms are just sort of tucked in a little bit, and they're sitting really on my ankle bones rather than on my legs. And encouraging that sense of stretch from the base of the spine, even in the glutes, all the way across the back and into the neck, the very top of the neck. And then I'm going to use the hands to lift myself back up gently. And I will use the hands around the back of the thighs just to lift up. Now, I'm going to come onto all fours. I find it easy to just cross my ankles and roll onto the shins. Appreciate that not everyone finds that an enjoyable experience, so allow yourself to find your own place there. I'm going to come onto all fours eventually and bring the right foot through to the front of the mat. I'm going to have it a little further out to the side than I would normally, and I'm going to slide the left foot back as far as I comfortably can. At this point, I'm trying to keep the front knee over the ankle, and then we're going to come into high flying dragon. So I'm just going to bring the forearms onto that front thigh and let them sink forwards just a little bit into that knee. So I'm being conscious not to take the knee past the end of the toes. For me, I get less than an inch of movement forwards, but other people have more flexion available to them in their ankles. And tucking the toes underneath. If you can hear lots of drumming noise through the microphone, that's my next door neighbor who has been decorating. He's on furlough and has been for several months, but they have a fairly young dog in there, and he has to wait for his other half to get in before he can start decorating. Otherwise, the dog's playing with all the electric toys. That probably didn't sound like a very good combination. Puppies and hand sauce. So at the moment, he seems to be sort of banging on the wall from about 5 o'clock to about 8 o'clock, prime time. I got an imagination that he's sort of building a second TARDIS in there or something. And if you can't hear any of it, well, that was a wasted explanation. I'm going to bring the hands back down to the floor, ease myself back into tabletop position. So I've actually brought the hands on the inside of that front leg because it's just a little bit easier to move back. Again, that's my personal experience, however you find it easiest to get into the position. We take a couple of breaths here in this tabletop position, just letting the pelvis settle back down. You can imagine the stresses that are involved in the sacrum when the pelvis is left in an extended stretch for a period of time. And then bring the other foot through. Allow ourselves to take the opposite leg back as far as we comfortably can. Again, your choice whether you leave the toes tucked under or not. And then ease yourselves back up. And then let yourself sink forwards. The head position is really of choice. I find looking down at big toes on the front foot helps me connect with the ground and keeps me stable. If I look straight ahead, I tend to wobble all over the place. If you find it easy enough to do that, then great. It's amazing how wobbly we can feel in this pose, even though we're not actually trying to move anywhere. And we'll ease our way back out of that one as well. And you can either stay on all fours or sit directly down on the heels, whatever feels more comfortable. I'm going to take those two bricks to the very front of the mat, and we're going to come down into another dragon, but we're going to let the elbows sit down onto those bricks. So you could actually just use a bolster across the front of the mat if you have one that's available and it gives you enough support. With the two bricks on top of each other, I'm at the right height, but it does mean that my elbows, rather than being shoulder distance apart, come in a little bit. I find that reasonably comfortable. That might be the difference between wanting to use a bolster and not, where you position the elbows in, because it will strain the shoulders. And also, you come down as low as you feel comfortable. So you might find that the floor is the place that you want to be. Maybe you're able to get down there. So hands are shoulder distance apart. We're on all fours, and we're going to take the right foot out to the outside of the right hand. I'm going to let the foot spin out a little bit. I'm going to keep the heel just onto the mat so it's got a little bit of traction. And you're going to play around a little bit as to where your forearms and elbows are going to come. We're going to lean down, so there's going to be a drop, but there's naturally a bit of transition forwards as well. To compensate that a little bit, I'm going to take the back foot as far away as I can, lift the knee off the ground several times, and start to let the knee on the front leg drift out to the side. Going to offset my bricks just a fraction, and then bring my forearms down and let myself rest. And again, where you end up with your head position is really up to you. I find in this, keeping the head more or less in line with the spine, the easiest thing on the neck muscles. Some people, they're just going to be head completely down. So it's not one's better than the other. It's about possibly postural habits. Where does your neck muscles feel more at home? Also trying to let the shoulders roll away from the ears a little bit. I'm not pulling them down, but I'm letting them move away, letting them know that it's okay. They don't have to hunch up to look after me. And this is the low-flying dragon. And I'm going to ease my way back out. So I spent quite a bit of time prepping and getting into the pose. As you can see, again, just letting yourself come back up onto all fours and taking a moment for those hips and groins to settle themselves back into a more sort of natural alignment. And then when you feel comfortable, we'll take the left leg out, turn the toes out again, and remember that each side of your bodies are going to be different. So it's a new experience, a different experience, it's a different side. Try not to compete with ourselves and get into exactly the same position on both sides. If it happens, that's great, but if it doesn't, that's fine as well. When you feel ready, once it feels like the hips have opened up a little bit, that leg started to naturally hang out to the side by itself, you can bring those blocks into the right place. Bring yourself into your forearms. And then we'll bring the hands back. I'm going to bring the blocks with me. So back onto my knees. I'm going to tuck the toes underneath as I do so. And I'm going to take those two bricks out of the front on the high end. And just place the palms down. So again, you could use the bolster if it's a strong, well-formed bolster. And then I'm going to lift up. Take the knees away from the floor. Bring the feet in a little closer. I'm just going to allow myself to lengthen the chest forwards. So again, you might want to play. Maybe you put the bolster on top of one of the blocks to get a bit more height. Depends really a little bit on, you know, how long the legs and the arms are, how far away you find the floor. So I'm just lengthening the spine out at the moment. And then I'm going to see if I can hang down. So we're going to hinge at the hips, slowly fold the body in. And then if it feels good, you can take the hands away from the supports and just fold the arms over so your forearm can become a bit of a cradle for the crown of the head. It's called the dangling pose. So there is an element of dangling to take place. You could dangle and keep your hands on the blocks or on the floor if it felt better. There is quite a lot of stretch taking place in the hamstrings. But also we're letting the spine hang out of the pelvis, so hopefully as the tailbone lifts up towards the sky, the head can drop down towards the floor. And we all get a bit of a head rush because we get a lot of blood going down to the head, not necessarily pumping back out. So it's going to feel a little bit heavy. Okay, we'll bring the hands back down onto the floor or onto the props. You can lift up halfway, draw the body out again. Okay, and take a few breaths here. Just let the heart have a little bit of time to pump some blood back around the body. Going to start to draw the belly in towards the spine. And I'm going to ask you to then zigzag your toes a little bit closer together. Still a little bit of a gap, but maybe just an inch or so. And then we're going to soften the knees, bring the thighs together, sit back deep. I'm going to move the bricks out of the way because I don't need them anymore. Allow myself to take the hands slowly out in line with the body. So we're into chair pose. Weight is in the heel a little bit. I'm squeezing the thighs together now. Drawing the belly in. Trying to lift the chest a little. And then I'm going to come back down to the floor. Let the hips lift. Walk the fingers in towards the front of the mat. Take the legs back into a down dog. So just reversing in nicely. Now I'm going to walk the dog out a little bit so that you can feel the calf muscles in the feet getting a nice stretch. Maybe consciously pressing the hands down into the floor so there's no gaps. Trying to turn the hips up towards the sky. Inadvertently drowning in t-shirt again. Now we're going to come back down into a plank. Let the knees come to the floor. Sit gently down. Take the knees out to the side. And let myself slowly sit back. I lengthen the legs out in front. I'm going to take the block behind my bottom, but I'm not actually going to sit on it to start with. I'm just going to work on Dandasana flat on the floor. So I'm going to draw the feet back, and ideally the big toe and little toe the same distance from our bodies. So you might have to turn the thighs in a little bit more and take the hands out to the side. As well as lengthening out through the heels and flexing the feet back, then press those sitting bones down into the floor and try and draw the crown of the head high as we relax the shoulders out wide. There's quite a lot of things to think about, so we layer them on one at a time. And then we're going to move from here gently. So I'm going to bend the knees and just ease myself back up onto the block. I'm going to bring the right heel into the groin and the knee down to the floor. If it doesn't reach the floor, just pack the leg out. So a brick underneath the back of the thigh. Turn the body to face the front of the mat. So you squeeze the hips round square to the front of the mat. You put a little bend in the knee, keep the foot flexed. Hands onto the shin, and we lift up. I'm going to fold over. Keep the spine long and draw it out. Looking towards the toes. And slide the hands down around the outside edge of the foot or as far forward as you can. And then draw yourself forwards and let yourself lower down even further. So we're getting quite deep into that forward fold. The pelvis is tilting forwards as much as we can. I'm just using the hands on the foot a little bit to draw it back. Making a really conscious effort to turn that thigh in, the toes towards the sky. One more breath here. Going to release. Use the hands back on the floor to help lift up. I'm going to take it across to the other side. So you may get deeper or less deep than how I end up in the pose, and that's okay again. It's about finding your own space. Let's set this leg up and hips, etc. Front knee bends, hands come onto the shin. Lift up, I get as much drive up through the body as I can towards the sky, and then fold the hips over the thighs. That gets me halfway. Then I slide the hands down and fold the body in. That gets me a little further towards the ground. Now I'm not trying to use the head to bob myself down. I'm still looking towards my toes. My head lifted a little bit. I've got a little bit of a kink in the back of the neck going on. Send the tailbone back. Use a little bit of strength in the arms to draw that foot a little closer. And then I use the hands on the floor to walk myself back up. So the reason I wanted to go in deep and bendy rather than long is so that I got a little bit more chance in this version. I'll take the feet out as wide as my hips. So there's quite a lot of space down here to fill, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll bring the right foot in. Now the foot is still pointing parallel to the front of the mat. And if my knee is hanging out to the side, then you're going to need to walk your foot out further. You want to try and get this shin to be pretty much vertical. Now I'm going to use the left hand on the floor and a little bit behind, and draw the shoulder around and lean through that gap that I've just made. So I've got some space, and I'm going to ease myself forwards, and ideally I'm getting my shoulder pass in front of that knee. So just letting that happen. It's going to take a few breaths to get there. Still stretching out through the front leg. Trying to get the body nice and long. Now, the further I can get that shoulder forwards, the easier it becomes to take the hand around so the palm faces backwards, and we bring the hand back towards the hip bone. Now, you might want to just stay there. That's fine. You might grab hold of the waistband with the other hand and we'll continue to lean forwards. You might want to grab its strap and then just give yourself a little bit of a flick with the strap so you can grab hold of that in both hands. Or you might be able to take the hands away from the floor, hook the fingers together, and then keep the chest pointing towards the front of the mat rather than twisting in. I'm going to lean further forwards, and the more we're able to lean forwards, the easier it is on that shoulder to get the hand round towards the back of the body and get the bind. Again, being careful not to let the head drop. Around the shoulders, it just adds a little bit more tension into the body than you need. And now I'm going to release, untangle, and take it into the second side. So again, we spend a little bit of time to set up. The feet are at least hip distance apart. Okay, draw the foot in. Make sure that feels comfortable, that the foot can point forwards and the knee points up towards the sky. Got a little eagle hair there for this evening. And take the right hand out to the side, and then I'm going to use that space to lean forwards and just start to work on lengthening the body through. This leg is pretty straight, the foot is still flexed. I'm lengthening out through the heel, actually pressing the hip back a little bit as well. Give myself a little bit more time. Get some length in the body. And then take the hand behind slowly, so just hook it around. Now, if you're able to get your fingers to touch the hip bone joint, then you're usually okay to take the opposite hand away from the ground and get a little bind going on. Again, we're trying to lift the chest forwards. Let the shoulders relax a little bit. They do tend to sort of hunch around the ears in this pose, and then that makes it even more tricky because you're taking your hands apart rather than towards each other. If you can let the shoulders relax down a little bit, you'll find that there's easier bind behind you. And I'm using the core muscles to draw myself forwards and up as well. That's playing its part. And then I'm going to release from there and untangle. Now, again, depending on whether you've got long arms and short legs and what the combination is, you might need the strap for this next one. I'm going to bring the feet more together on the center line, sitting up nice and tall. I'm going to take the left foot under, and rather than taking it out to the side, I'm going to bring my heel more in towards the groin. So this left knee that you can't see is now pointing out about 45 degrees out to the side of the mat, and the shin is on the floor. And then I'm going to bring the other foot in, and I'm going to aim for the sort of outer edge of that hip bone. So again, taking plenty of space. Now I'm going to place the hands underneath the sole of the foot, and leave the heel on the ground for the moment. If that feels incredibly difficult to get into that position, lots of strain in the shoulders, you've got a very rounded back, head is dropped, etc., then just take the strap and place it around the big toe, little toe joint. Have the fingers right up next to the foot. And then as you start to lengthen the body up, you're going to lift the leg up and out. And you can hold on to the strap. Now, if you can take the hands around the sole of the foot, great, but this works just as well. We're trying to have the toes pretty much in line with the chin. Lengthen out through the heel a little bit. You press the heel out, flex the foot back, draw the hip back into the hip socket, lift the body up out of the pelvis. Try not to lean back too much. So you'll notice if your front leg shin gets very light, if there's no weight in it, then you're probably leaning back a little further than you need to. You want to bring it back in so there's a little bit of weight getting distributed through there. It feels more comfortable, more safe. There's a stronger foundation to play with. And keeping the belly drawn in to help lift the spine up, and the shoulders draw back just that little bit. So the shoulders and the legs are really working together. Now it's difficult to hold on to this for more than a minute because the hands get tired, so just won't do that. We'll bring the leg back down and then shake out those fingers again. And also take the legs out in front again, the feet come together, and then that heel comes in towards the groin, knees out to the side. It's a bit easier to see on this side. And then the opposite foot comes in towards the outside hip joint. Allow yourself to decide whether you want to use the strap or not. Take a little breath. I'm just going to turn the toes underneath a little bit more. There we go. And then lengthen the spine up. Take a breath and lengthen the leg out. Now, one thing I will say is that if your leg is spiraling out to the side a little bit, try and turn the thigh inwards. You'll be surprised what a difference that makes to where you end up in the pose. It doesn't necessarily feel natural if the leg is wanting to spin out. You have to kind of work against every natural feeling in your body. But it does allow you to get to a place that's more comfortable eventually. It's a question of your body getting used to that alignment. So the nerves are kind of trying to draw the leg in a different direction. Can be a little bit confusing for the body. And we can release from there as well. And bring the foot down. So I'm going to take what they call a rested Shavasana. And you probably think, well, Shavasana feels pretty rested anyway. But it comes from the restorative yoga philosophy, where you take something under the back of the knees, which could be bricks and blocks or rolled up blankets, or in my case, a very old bolster. Now, that's the sort of comfortable position we're going to be in, but I would suggest that the knees come high first and roll down. So you give a little bit of support into the spine rather than just coming straight down with the legs in position. That might be okay for your back, but it doesn't feel great in mine, so I just take the precaution. Let the feet go out as wide as the mat, the legs roll out, hands by the side. And then it really is a very rested Shavasana. Just loosen the jaw, close the eyes, and we let everything sink into stillness and peace. Listening to our breath, slowing down. And we'll begin to stretch those fingers and toes. Let the wrists and ankles join in. Allow ourselves a nice big stretch. And then slowly draw the heels in and bring the knees in towards the body. A little hug, shake, rock and roll. And I'm going to roll gently down onto the right side. I use the hands to press into the floor on an exhale to ease my way back up to sitting. So sitting up tall in whatever posture is easy for you. Let the hands come in towards our heart. Take a breath in. And as we slowly exhale, let that chin drop. Let the belly draw in and simple bow to the floor to seal the practice. Breath comes back into the body, we can lift. Finally, the head follows, the eyes follow and open. Namaste. Thank you for joining me this evening. Hopefully you feel nice and relaxed after that. If you want a little bit more rested Shavasana, then go ahead. Otherwise, stay safe and I'll see you again soon. Take care.